Hello and welcome everybody to the Doof Game Over stream, Doof Media's exploration of the joy of play. I'm Ruben
And I'm
Morehouse,
Elliot Diebold.
and we are here for the Game Over stream. In case you don't know what the Game Over stream is, each month on the Game Club we pick a game and we play it, and we all have fun in Discord talking about it and arguing about roguelikes. And then at the end of the month we do this Game Over stream where we just kind of wrap up as a capstone our thoughts and do some Q&A and all kinds of things so that the team can kind of so that the whole community can see what we thought about the game.
Yeah, so there's a link on the screen right now to get into that Discord and actually participate in like the main part of Game Club. If you only watch the YouTube streams, I recommend you check it out.
Yeah, it's always fun. This month we are talking about Into the Breach.
Yeah. Uh,
So
it's the second game by Subset Games, and I believe the second game we're covering by Subset Games.
yes, we have so far covered every subset games game that has ever existed.
I do want to say you could tell this was made by the same people as FTL. Like not
100%.
not just from the art, although definitely from the art. But like just the way like interfaces were designed, like a lot of little stuff. You could really see that it's a small team who has a unique style, and it came across even in a very different game.
Yeah, you can feel the evolution of FTL into the Breach for sure. Yeah, I guess let's start talking about it, shall
Yeah.
we?
Oh,
Because Into the
should
Breach.
we do some overall thoughts before we
Oh
dive in?
yeah, overall thoughts. Um, Liked it. It's quite a fun game. I mean, I guess I'll pull in something that I was going to talk about a bit later, which is like this is the kind of game where the fun to me is in optimization. It's a
The
game for
funnest
big
pursuit.
nerds. Yeah, exactly. Big nerds like myself who like optimizing things. And that's really what this game is trying to figure out how to be optimal.
Yeah. Um, I'd agree with that. I think for me, the roguelike formula got in the way of that, but this has been talked to death on the Discord, and yeah, we'll bring it up later. But yeah, I mean, this is probably a great segue into the first topic we wanted to bring up, um,
Mhm.
which is just the nature of this thing as a roguelike like puzzle game, really.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I guess you would kind of traditionally call a game like this a strategy game, like your Fire Emblems or your Advanced Wars or what have you.
Yeah.
But there are a few key decisions that this game makes that make it almost. I mean, a strategy game is already pretty similar to a puzzle game in a lot of ways, but almost explicitly a puzzle game, basically. A series of micro puzzles that you solve every turn.
Yeah, it probably almost sits between the two ideas in my head, but yeah, like I agree. Like the fact that you see what the Vec are gonna do pushes it much further away from what I'd classify as a strategy game and move it a lot closer to how you process a puzzle. Um,
Yeah, like
but
yeah,
it
I
feels
guess
like a
it's.
hybrid of the two ideas.
I'll also flag something similar. I think happened in the design for Slay the Spire, another previous Game Club game, which was, seeing what the opponents are going to do, just does completely change the feeling of games like this, where you're managing resources to make it feel a lot more active and clever in a really fun way. So yeah, I
Well,
mean,
it's
we've seen this
sorry,
now.
especially in a
Mm,
game where you're playing against the computer. I feel like that matters.
mm,
Like if Slay the
yeah,
Spire or Into the Breach were multiplayer games, and I think there's multiplayer mods of both. We didn't really get a chance to dive into those, but like if this was designed to be a multiplayer game, you wouldn't really be able to get away with that. But it's like because it's single player, you well they went with the decision to sort of make it less strategy luck based and more puzzly. Um,
mm,
And yeah, which I like. I mean, you mentioned Slay the Spire. I think it came up during that game club. That was a decision they made later into the development. I think Slay the Spire was in early access, and it originally didn't tell you what the enemies were going to do. And
yes,
then I think, due to community feedback, they experimented with adding it, and everyone liked it better. Um, I don't know if
yeah.
that came before or after Into the Breach, but it's definitely a system I approve of. I like it.
Yeah, I basically am starting to think now that strong telegraphing of what's going to happen on the enemy's next turn is basically a prerequisite for any, um, any turn-based strategy-esque kind
Yeah.
of game.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely into it. Yeah.
To compare Into the Breach to another card game that I play a fair amount, which is Hearthstone. It's like these games all kind of scratch the same itch to me of like, you've got a limited number of actions, uh, which is, Into the Breach, it's your one move and one action per mech. In Hearthstone, it's all your cards and minions and whatever. Um, and your goal is basically to you have one overarching goal, which in this is survive, and you're what you're playing to do is just basically try and figure out the best possible move you can with your limited set of actions, and it's just such a fun and compelling you know type of game to me. I think it's similar to like worker management style board games and things like this. I always just love it. It's always just like, well, how can I spend my 4 or 5 things per turn to be the best possible turn it can be? And especially because it's never like a binary. Like, it's very rare that you feel like you've done a perfect move or a completely whatever the opposite of perfect move is, a tragic move. I've referred to it as before. But it's very rare that you have those. And most of it is just like, okay, this move feels like it gives me a slightly better position than that other move,
Yeah.
or oh, I can take if I have to lose either this or this, I'll choose to lose this. And it's like, yeah, you're never completely perfect. You're just trying to figure out what are the trade-offs that you're willing to make. And I find that a very satisfying mental loop to get into.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I and this is where difficulty came into this game in a big way for me because I tried playing on normal the first time I played, and I just got my ass absolutely handed to me because
Mm.
like as you say, the way these games work is they kind of give you this like smaller, more limited decision space to play in each turn. Um, and it was too big for me the first time I went in. And yeah, I fell apart. And then I tried it on easy and like absolutely killed it. Got my head around all the mechanics or everything. Went back to normal and absolutely loved normal from that point on. Like hard, I never quite got to, but it's interesting how that like balancing of the size of the decision space is both something that's kind of unique to each player. Like I don't think I'm very good at this kind of game, so I sort of started with a smaller one than probably a lot of other people playing this month. But it like grows as you get more comfortable, and that's where compared to FTL, I think the difficulty settings in Into the Breach really deserve a good shout out because I thought they really made the experience better for everyone. Like I saw some people playing hard, my brain hurt watching them, but it was cool that people who can cope with the bigger decision space and tighter decisions had that opportunity.
Mm. Yeah. The difficulties in this were great. I started on normal, played it a few times, enjoyed it, then wanted to move on to hard, and really felt like I was learning and progressing and getting better. One of the things that I really liked about playing this game was I kind of built up a mental list of like techniques I could use, like, oh, I've seen somebody do this thing before, I tried this thing before and it worked. And it kind of gets added to my map of like, as an example, one of the artilleries you have shoots a thing that doesn't necessarily do damage but pushes creatures. So you learn a move after just by chance where you like use that artillery to push a creature into yourself. You call it the self bonk to do 1 damage to you and the creature.
Yeah.
It's just like these little techniques, or like not even techniques, but just kind of interactions that you start learning and building your map of, so that you can kind of build out if I try this here and do that there and this there, and it starts just making you feel like a real whiz. I loved it.
Yeah, like I definitely when I first started playing, I was like glancing past um any like new weapon or something that didn't directly do a bunch of damage. Like it was very 8-year-old Elliot plays Pokemon again, where it was like this is not a damaging move. Get out of here. Um
Yeah.
and then yeah, like as I started to see things like ice just preventing the Vec from like respawning, and stuff
Mm.
like that, you start to see the power of things that weren't like, yeah, directly doing damage. And I'd pick some of that up from the Vec doing it to me. I'd pick some of that up from
Yeah.
watching other people's streams. Something I regret not doing until way too late in this month was like being willing to accept help from chat. I was like trying to learn the game myself and get that like pure experience, but um, I wasn't good enough to do that. I should have just been like learning from everyone else. And like I ended up having way more fun when I just started, yeah, stealing tricks and strategies from the Vec and from other people.
The way that my streams usually ended up going is, I'd get into a rhythm of like, okay, I think this is my optimal move, and then I would kind of explain it, and then I'd sit there for a few seconds considering it, and that'd be an opportunity for chat to chime in and say, oh, actually, you missed that this thing could be done, and then like, ah, yes, that's an interesting strategy, and then kind of try things out.
Yeah,
It's really fun.
I should have done more of that. Also, I should do more of that pausing to actually consider a move once I've come up with it. I'm dreadful with, like, my impatience really was part of my downfall in this game, and we've seen it in some other games in Game Club. But God, in this one, like, yeah,
Maybe some of the highlights of my stream were I got the pilot that lets you get 2 resets per battle instead of one, and that
whoa,
let me just be like experimental a bit more without having to freak
yeah,
out about it. So I'd be like, okay, what if I do this, 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 this? Oh, okay, but then I've missed a damage here or something, so you reset. And I really did like that, and it's kind of, I mean, I understand why you can't reset too much, but it did sadden me that I couldn't just completely experiment all the time. Otherwise, if I had been able to do that, though, I think we would have ruined the fun for ourselves by just chasing that perfect turn too many
yeah,
times.
you could enter your own form of like decision paralysis
Yeah,
by like,
exactly.
yeah, insisting. I don't know. I could suffer to move a bit more in that direction personally, I think. So maybe that would have been good. Um I mean, one thing that's sort of coming up here, like that you've talked about, is that idea that like as you sort of learn the systems of the game more, you know, learn a bunch of really cool tricks. And this has like brought something to my mind, and I don't quite know if I've reached like the point that I want to make with this. I'm still exploring this idea, but I wanted to bring it up.
Mm, mm,
We saw it a lot with Barbar is You, where when you have these puzzly games that sort of are trying to teach you a system, I almost feel like there's two different strands to the logic they're teaching you. So like with Into the Breach, you're trying to like say learn to manage your mechs, or in Barbar is You, you need to like, move the words to create rules. And as you move into like the later or the harder parts of these games, some of the puzzles start to become a lot more about the intricacies of the system, like order of operations and stuff. Like in Barbar is You, I'm thinking
mm.
about some of the later levels where like the trick was dependent on you knowing that like float overrides this when this is in effect or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And like I never like those levels as much because it doesn't feel like I'm really using the rules of the space. It feels like I'm just needing to remember a intricacy that I may have experienced somewhere else in the game. And Into the Breach had that a little bit with some things where like sometimes it just felt like I wasn't learning the system. I was learning like some rule that's really just a side effect of the way it's programmed in the order of operations more than like the system itself.
Mm.
Um so like one example of this, and it's a very obvious one that's very easy to learn. So like it's a bad example of the complaint, but like the fact that the environmental effects take place before the Vec have their turn
Mm.
is more just like a bit of an arbitrary rule that you have to learn to account for rather than like an ingrained part of the system.
But I mean, yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, but I guess that isn't a good example because environmental effects have to either be before or after the mech, right? Like
Yeah,
they have to be somewhere.
it did start to feel like in a couple of in a couple of situations, particularly with Into the Breach, it was like little intricacies of the order of operations of systems I hadn't really seen interact before would either like
Mm,
screw me or like completely mean things didn't go how I expected. And like I
mm,
always get a bit annoyed when I'm like losing because of that, because it's not something I should be able to predict from the rules of the system as I understand them. I
yeah,
guess that's the
yeah.
difference really. Is like in Barbar is used, like there's no reason that that rule would override this rule when the other rule's in effect. And
Yeah.
it was the same. There were a few interactions in Into the Breach where it felt a bit cheap when I lost to them the first time, or because my memory's ass the second time, and I'd be like, oh well, how am I meant to remember that this, overrides that or whatever?
Yeah, there are definitely some things like that in here. I mean, I saw an article today when I was putting together my notes that was, top 20 things that Into the Breach just doesn't tell you. And, an example would be when a flying creature is frozen, it loses its flying status, right? Something like that, where like, that I think that was one that caught me out while I was playing. One of my flying things got frozen above like a water or a pit or something, and something happened. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there are some things in there like that. But on the whole, I do think that Into the Breach does a very good job making a lot of this stuff visible. I mean, not just the attacks and like the effects that are going to happen. I mean, on the screen you can see, like right now, you can see, oh, this forest is going to catch on fire, this rock is going to break. You can see
Yeah.
the turn order. You can see all these things. There are a few that aren't there, but I think a lot of them are,
Yeah,
yeah, really good.
I will say I'm almost bringing this up more. This bothered me a lot more in Barbar as You than it did in Into the
Mm,
Breach. There were just one or two moments in Into the Breach where it happened, and it reminded me of that. And I guess I just wanted to bring it up because it just, yeah, it's something I think I was still processing. I'm settling on this idea of like whether these rule interactions make sense within the rules that you should know, like freezing affecting flying. I think actually kind of makes sense. Like when you think about it, like if I got caught off guard by that, you would sort of be like, well, okay, yeah, I guess it makes sense. I can't keep flying if I'm frozen solid. Like, okay, like
mm,
sure. Um, but yeah, when you get caught off by one and you're just like, I don't know how I was really meant to predict that these things would interact like this. Um, I maybe that's because I admittedly did not play as much of this game as I would have liked. And maybe it was just because I was still learning so much at the start.
mm.
I don't know. Uh,
Fair enough.
yeah, like obviously there's the chat's got some feedback on this. Like Warbo's pointing out that um a lot of this stuff is in the UI if you look for it, and I would
Mm,
say that that's true. But at least early on in the game, I didn't always recognize the signals in the UI. I think this UI at times provides you with so much information that I would found it easy to miss some clues it was giving me. Which is just, I guess, a side effect of still learning the game. I mean, that's true of just about every game I've ever played. Like when you start, you can miss some
mm,
signals the UI is giving you.
mm. Yeah, I feel like you would. I guess because there are a fair amount of things in this game, not to an overwhelming extent, but a fair amount of status effects, for example. Having a full understanding of how each of them maps to each other one is not necessarily possible until you've played a huge amount.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point in the chat, Dawn. Like, yeah, I agree. I guess again, this is a point that wasn't as strong for me Into the Breach as it was in Barbar. As you probably doesn't belong as prominently in this stream, but um yeah, I guess maybe I'd argue it's a bit of a thing of the UI maybe not explaining that this is what it's telling me because it's using icons or something.
Mm,
Yeah, I don't know. I will
mm.
admit I think I was just bad at reading. I found the UI in this game a little bit overwhelming at times. There was so much going on. I just struggled to keep up with the game, I think.
Yeah, I think you probably will learn it over time. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, oh, no, exactly. That's like I'm not going to criticize the game for that because if I play it more and I become like better at it or good at it, I would want all that information. So like I'm not going to criticize the game for giving me too much at the start because there's almost a part of you that just has to be willing to be a bit shit at the start,
Mm.
and know that you're going to miss some stuff.
Oh, I guess it's a cost of the roguelike formula where like the game doesn't want to have to only introduce, for example, the concept of acid or fire to you or smoke, after you've
Yeah,
played for 4 hours, right? These things are all there from the get go, which means the cost of that is the start of it is a bit more overwhelming as you learn the systems. I don't know.
That's true, because like a linear game like Doom Eternal, we almost complained too. It went too far the other way last month, where like
Mm.
it over tutorialized everything. Um, a roguelike game like this kind of has to account for the fact you could encounter this shit in any order.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it does a decent job of it because you unlock the later islands, and so the later
yeah,
islands do sometimes act as the gates to introduce new mechanics, but it's not like a it's not a hard gate. It's a pretty quick one to get past, depending on how
yeah.
fast you play the game. I mean, I know you went for a 4 island run on your very first run, didn't you?
Um,
So like it
Look,
didn't get you at all
I
effectively.
mean, yeah, like I tried that first run on normal, got my ass handed to me, switched to easy, and then like immediately got a 4 island win.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then when I went back to normal, it was like, oh, I understand what's going on. I can actually compete in normal now. Like I definitely recommend if you're someone like me and this isn't a genre you've spent much time in, normal's where you want to start. Sorry, easy's where you want to start for sure.
Mm, yeah.
I mean, there was definitely a part of me playing this. Like, obviously, the my opinion on roguelikes has been argued to death, but there was a definitely part of me that was like comparing this in my head to Mario versus Rabbids, which is like probably the closest I played to a game that plays like this, and I couldn't help but prefer how that game plays in its not being a roguelike.
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know if we'll get to that. I think you've got a slide that kind of touches on this later, but um
Well, yeah, I guess the next thing I kind of want to talk about and what my next slide is really hinting at is like I think one of the reasons that people love roguelikes a lot is they can have this kind of purity of design, I guess you would call it. Um, and I think Into the Breach is one of the strongest games on that I've ever played. Like the design of this game just feels like it's so finely tuned. It's hard to find the words to describe it. All the systems in this game feel like they're the perfect expressions of what they should be. The purity of the roguelike in this game just feels very precise. You can tell that it's very cleverly designed
yeah,
while still being, incredibly simple in a lot of ways.
saying it's like really well balanced doesn't feel like it's really selling what you're trying to say, does it? But it's like it's
Yeah.
the this weird mixture of depth and shallowness. Like as you said, like there's never once you sort of get past these opening hurdles, you don't feel that overwhelmed with your options. There's a finite space that you can really explore if you've got the patience for it. But at the same time, there's so much depth to the system overall that like it almost always feels fresh and like you for a very long time as you get through the game, you're really experiencing new stuff. So it's like it's kind of
Mm.
amazing that they managed to build something that has a lot of depth, but at the same time limits how much of that depth is accessible at any given time, so it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. There is something that I really like about Into the Breach. Sorry, got it confused with FTL again. Something that I really liked about Into the Breach, as compared to FTL, something that I found FTL faltering on after a little while was like the encounters never felt like they had that much
Mm,
variety. And I don't feel like there's that much more variety in Into the Breach, but because you have this system of like, you've got your map, which will have one or two weird quirks. You've got the Vec that you can find, which will have one or two quirks, and you have your kind of objectives that will have one or two quirks, right? And just that is enough to mean that it always feels relatively distinct.
yeah,
Like things will emerge in ways that you didn't really expect. You have to solve different kinds of problems. I thought that worked
yeah.
really well to keep the game pretty
Like
fresh.
Hades would be the one that jumps out to me as like, and obviously I think I felt this more than most people, but like it was all hack and slash, right? And it was like different weapons, different enemies, like different hack and slash. But at the end of the day, like with an action game, you're kind of doing a very similar set of things each
Mm,
turn. Whereas in this one,
mm,
like even between runs, you start to change your mechs, and that changes the whole game. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, like yeah, it's a really clever game to put into this genre of something like a roguelike because that just lets it expand outwards. It's like a combinatorics sort of thing, right? Where it's like, they've got
Mm,
100 systems and you're accessing 5 at a time, and they just sort of keep changing
mm,
which 5 you have.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, we've talked about the kind of availability of information. I do think it is worth celebrating that in this game. Like the brilliance of you can see the next turn and how it's going to play out, which means you want to plan out and optimize, but you can never plan too far in advance because obviously you can only see one turn in
Yeah.
advance. So you can never like you're never going to sit there for ages trying to consider all the best possible moves 4 turns into the future, so you don't get too paralyzed.
Yeah. It doesn't turn
Um,
into chess where you've got to be thinking, yeah, like an hour ahead. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it doesn't let you do that, which is great. Or the fact that like the fact that there's so many different ways to deal with threats. Like so, obviously killing a Vec is the main one, but then you can push Vec into other Vec. You can push them into water or other
Or,
environmental
or
obstacles. You
just
can
push them away from the building they're going to attack.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
exactly. Or just make it that yeah, the fact that you can just push a Vec and their attack will go in the same direction, but
miss.
like it's just such a simple but brilliant
Yeah. Well,
thing.
and to talk about that decision space, you talk about like that's what really opens up this whole looking for the
Yeah,
perfect turn, because you're balancing. You can often find multiple turns that will mean you take no damage, and then you're almost just trying to balance, well, how much damage can I do to them? Like, and
yeah.
that's sort of a really fun space to play in.
Yeah, or like, oh, which Vec do I really want to prioritize killing versus just
The
moving? You
jellyfish. You
know?
want to get the jellyfish.
Yeah, always get the jellyfish, 100%. Um, and then you get to ones later where, like, I can't remember the exact setup for it, but there was one where I was trying to get I think it was an achievement for, have like 8 Vec kill each other through a run
Mm,
or through a single battle or something like that. And I was just like, this is so much fun. There's different squads of mech that are all like based around having Vec hurt each other and things like that. And you just kind of like, yeah, the depth of like different ways to strategize and achieve your objective is just so
yeah.
well constructed.
I got a weapon for my main mech at one point, which let me like turn the Vec around. And fuck, I had
Mm,
fun with that one. Like that, like not just being able to move them away from stuff, but like, sometimes a Vec would be like, pointing a huge amount of damage at a building, and there'd be another Vec right behind it. So I just go up and turn it around, and it was like, oh, it was so satisfying. Um, like the different ways you can interact with a tile, I think, is a huge part of what gives this game the depth that it has.
mm, yeah, yeah. It's a very, very deep game in a very cool way.
Yeah, yeah, because the depth is spread out. I don't feel like I have a good term for this, but it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just finding different ways to say you only have access to part of that depth at a time.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I also want to quickly sort of call out something that I found really interesting that speaks to the balance in this game is like currency wasn't really a thing. And what I mean by that is like
Mm,
obviously between rounds, or sorry, between islands and stuff, you have the ability to like buy upgrades and stuff. All of them cost, or essentially all of them just cost like 1 unit. I forget what the units are called, but like, you know what I mean? Like, if we compare it to like just about any other game, especially the roguelikes like Slay the Spire, FTL, Hades, there will be different weapons or whatever available to you, and there'll be 200 currency or 100 currency. In this one, everything was just the same price, and I felt like that was super interesting because in all the other games, it's basically saying, do you have enough money to buy this? Are you willing to go all in on this or whatever? This game kind of sends me this message when I'm looking at all these different weapons that cost the same amount. It's kind of saying none of these are strictly better. Like, what build are you going for? And like, how many
mm,
things are you willing to buy? I thought that was super interesting.
mm.
I haven't really seen a game before that just made things cost something, but everything was the same price.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. It's not something I'd really considered, but it does, I guess, support the ability of the game to let you kind of branch out. Something that's obviously quite large, is quite important in a roguelike is when you have to kind of respond to the cards that are dealt to you by the
Yeah.
game, right? Um, so having a wide accessibility of things you can get, all for the same similar costs,
Mm.
I guess supports that and allows you to go down whatever path you kind of want. I think that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, by having them all be the same price, it really makes you consider all of them the same weight. Whereas, like, realistically, if I open a shop in FTL, I start by looking at the most expensive things I can afford because I assume those are the things I should get.
The best
Um,
things, sure.
Whereas, yeah, like with this one, I really would sort of look at each one. It would do something completely new or different to everything else and be like, okay, how could I fit this into one of my three mechs?
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
And yeah, Dawn does bring up a good point, which was that you could trade, yeah, I think it was three cores to get like power grid back. So there was like multiple ways to spend it as well. Um,
I think you could spend 2 stars on a grid or 3 stars on a core. Is that right? Maybe it was
yeah.
1 star on a grid. I don't remember now.
Um, but yeah, I like yeah, I thought it was yeah super interesting that all the upgrades were just like universally priced.
Mm. Mm. I do want to call out one part of the game that I found was strange and didn't quite
Oh,
fit,
hold on, we've got
which is
audio on for this one, I believe. This clip.
yes.
Still gonna take 3 damage. So yeah. I do not deserve this. Oh, that's what we call all
The I do
skill.
not deserve this, I think, really is what sells it.
Yeah, because that was the only
Um,
reason I completed my mission. Like, and I think for context, that was the fourth resistance I'd gotten in about 3 scenarios. And you can see my power grid was only at 3. I should not have been alive. Um, yeah, which is yeah. So let's talk about grid defense chances.
yeah, because grid defense is the part that doesn't quite fit to me. I think it's worth saying, like, I get the idea behind it of there needs to be some kind of a sink that allows you to, if you have too much stars to spend, you need somewhere to put them, right? Grid defense is a good kind of sink that is usually the worst reward you can get, but at least there's something there,
Yeah,
right? So you don't feel like you're just wasting your
like
stars and
and
stuff.
because everything costs nothing, you've got nothing to save for.
Yeah, exactly. But it just is
The
such a strange and weird,
the
like,
randomness is very
randomness. Yeah,
antithetical to the whole rest of the design. Like the reason it feels silly is because everything else is like this is everything that's going to happen in the turn. Like
yeah,
what where it's all going, and you know
yeah,
exactly what's going to happen, except for this one thing that's super important that could just go in any way. And I think the thing that frustrates me is it's meant to be a very positive source of randomness. Like for anybody who's watched that
yes,
GMTK video on randomness, it's meant to feel like because the randomness only ever really helps you. But it
yeah,
felt
and you
cheap
can never
when
really,
it did. Like
yeah,
this is what like irritated me is like even when I would get good luck, I felt like I didn't deserve it.
you feel
Yeah,
guilty, don't you? Like, it's good that if you knew it was going to happen, it would be bad because the fact that it isn't reliable means you can't rely on it, obviously, by
yeah,
definition, which is good. It means you've kind of expected that you're going to lose that grid power when it happens, which means it is like strictly a positive, but it just feels weird.
yeah.
It feels undeserved. It's like the whole point of this game is you're making the decisions with full information, and so it's your victory. I was looking into how people felt about the grid defense chance, and a number of people were just like, I kind of wish I had lost this round instead
Yeah.
because I didn't deserve
Well,
it.
yeah, I mean, we saw that video clip just there. Like, I had 3 power grid health left. I think I'd gotten on my 20% skill, I dodged about 8 damage in the past like 3 scenarios, and it was just like I shouldn't be here. Like this run is a
Yeah.
joke. Like I don't deserve this. Um, yeah, I wasn't really a fan of it at all. I see what you're meaning about like needing somewhere to sink resources into, but like, oh, man, there has to be a better way.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there surely should be as well. Like, you instead of overcharging your power grid, you get like a shield on your next building or something, right? I don't know what it would be, but I'm sure there's some way to do it that is more predetermined, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, because I just yeah, I feel like on paper it reads as positive randomness, but for me, what I found was in one run I actually was doing quite well and really invested in it, and I think I got my grid defense like all the way up to like 29% or something. And then
Mm,
I don't think I got any blocks, like when I took like 4 damage in a row, and I was like really mad. I'm like, what's the fucking point? I put all my resources into getting sick grid defense, and it was useless.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's the thing about it is you can never. It feels like a system that you can't really engage with that much, which is
yeah,
weird. It just feels weird. Like there's pilots, for example, that give you more grid defense, and you're just kind of like, I don't know how to feel about this. This is a system that I is kind of explicitly a black box that I shouldn't be able to interact with that much.
yeah.
I don't know.
I think it just bugs you more than it would in another game because it's antithetical to how like
Yeah,
information is given to you everywhere else in the game. It's like
yeah,
the single source of randomness, and so all your feelings towards RNGs just get lumped on this one mechanic.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Also, and I know that this is just me being a human who's really bad at statistics, but like it just never felt worth it. Like the difference between like 15% and 30% to me, I'm like, you have to put in so much to get there. And it did,
And you have
and
to take damage. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I don't
But
know.
it was like, it just felt to me like that wasn't much. And I know that it is like doubling how much I dodged to the point where it should be 1 in 3. But like as a human, I see like 15 to 30% how much it took me to get there. And I'm like, that's not worth it. Um,
But yeah, I mean, it's not meant to be worth because if it was worth it, it would be even worse of a
yeah,
system,
true,
right?
true.
Like if you could get your grid defense up to 80%, that would be like a legitimate strategy, and you'd be like,
Yeah.
it would
Well,
it would
I mean,
suck. It would make the game suck.
that like well that was a strategy in FTL, right? Like remember you could get your dodge in FTL to something ridiculous
Yeah,
like 80%, and then it was like
yeah,
like 80% of the bullets would just fly past you, and it was like, but in that it felt like a bit more of a legitimate strategy because it tied into how the whole game worked. Um,
yeah,
yeah, in this one it just feels out of place. I think that's why it's sitting in a weird spot in our heads.
yeah, definitely. I want to talk about one other thing, which is just again kind of a weird psychological thing that I don't think is the fault of this game, but I think is interesting to talk about, which is just the fact that like this game is too easy to finish in my mind, and I don't know what it is, but every time we've played a roguelike in the game club, like Hades for sure, and FTL as well, like finishing the game for the first time, getting the victory, it really like when I'm playing these games, my train of thought is I want to get better so that I can finish the game. But this game is not meant to be about that, and I found myself really struggling with that. Like the first time I finished the game, it was in my second playthrough or something, and then that was on normal, and then I went and finished it on hard. And after I finished it on hard, I was just kind of like, okay, what do I do now? Like
Yeah.
I felt like I wanted to try out some of the other mechs, but I found myself my will to play the game really sapped because I had already completed the challenge that it had set out for me.
I mean, like this is interesting because it speaks to um like a bit my whole thing with roguelikes overall, which is how people draw their satisfaction from this stuff. Because for me, it was the opposite. Really, the only time I found myself super psyched to do another run of this game was after the time I finished it. Um,
That's so weird to me.
like the second I finished it was like, oh, I'm gonna try a different difficulty, or I want to try a different group of pilots. Um, Whereas like losing, particularly towards the end of a run, that was what would stop me from playing for days. Like yeah, I think it's funny the different this has sort of been, I guess, the theme for me this month is like sort of learning the different ways people derive satisfaction from like success and stuff, because uh I really struggled to get into this game because it was a roguelike. It's obviously the like fourth roguelike we've done for Game Club. And there was just this part of me that was just like sitting here playing this the first like week or two in, being like, I don't understand you people who like roguelikes. I hate this. Um
Uh,
and I sort of made it my mission for the month to try and explore what's different about me to the people who enjoy this sort of game and see if I could get there. Because I feel like with Dark Souls, I managed to get into that game and see most of what people liked about it, but roguelikes have just continued to elude me as like, but what are you getting out of this? Like,
but
yeah,
I mean, I would point at Dark Souls and kind of roguelikes in general. It's probably not applicable to all of them, but a bunch of them that I enjoy, and say, it's the same thing to me that makes me want to play them, which is the game sets up a big challenge for me, and I want to get good enough at the game so that I can beat that challenge.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, I'm the
Dark
same.
Souls, that's very obvious, but
I'm very like achievement driven is how I would
mm,
really define the way I play. Like, my primary genre that I play in my spare time is like collectathons. Like, what I like to
mm,
do is be set a challenge, do this, and then I do it, and then I put the game away forever until I want to
mm.
replay it. Um, I think what's funny is the way you seem to have seen beating the game on hard as checking that box. Um,
Yeah, right. Like
whereas to
that.
me,
That's just what it feels like to
I,
me.
I I think that's what it
Mm,
felt like to me, but it's interesting that you didn't have the instant want to go and play it with a different race, because for me, and this is definitely what I remember feeling in FTL as well. In FTL, it was like, and Slay the Spire, when I beat the game, it was like, hell yes, I have checked off that race, loadout, whatever. I'm going to immediately go to the next one.
mm,
Especially in like a game like FTL where each race plays quite differently. That
mm.
felt like a fresh enough challenge.
Yeah, I think that helped a bit, but I found myself, I don't know, I found myself not latching onto it as much. The challenge for me was let's beat this game on the hardest possible difficulty, not let's beat this game with every possible squad, I guess.
Yeah,
But I see what you mean.
I just find, yeah, I feel like this should be like a whole fucking topic of study. Like somebody should do a PhD on like what led you to like feel that way, and for me to be like, no, you want to beat it with each of them. Um,
Mm,
like because the different like because a big topic that sort of came up when we started talking about roguelikes was a big sort of part of my learning process was, or so is in games, that like when I fail at something, I want to go back and then like prove to myself I can do it. So the example that came up is like Mario Maker. Like I play a lot of endless Mario Maker, which is essentially just a roguelike. And what
mm,
happens is when I lose to a level, I will then just load it up in a different mode and keep going until I can beat it. And what frustrates me about something like Into the Breach is when I lose, I can't like go back and test whether I've learnt my lesson and improve. And I don't get the same satisfaction out of like beating a later run, because I'll have different mechs, I'll have had different enemies. Like, there's all the randomness and the procedural generation of the challenges and the levels. That to me, I don't get that feeling of satisfaction that I'm better because I won a later round, because I'm like, well, the RNG was different. Like it could be, just the different. It could have been an easier run. This went differently. Like I don't derive that same like, oh, I have gotten better and can beat that challenge that beat me before. Like I
mm.
almost wanted,
Because it's distinct,
yeah.
too distinct.
Whereas talking to a lot of the people in our club who are constantly pushing the roguelikes, um, they're very much the opposite. They want to understand the underlying systems a bit more, and so like they're happy to sort of take the lesson and internalize it and try to prove it
Mm.
to themselves in other situations. Whereas um, I guess just because of the way I played games growing up, for me it's like I want to prove it in that original situation first.
I wonder if something like a puzzle mode would be more like on your level,
Yeah.
like where the moves that the Vec and what Vec spawn in and all that stuff can be kind of predetermined with a seed or something, and then it's your job to solve
Yeah, well, and that
it.
was why I think in our notes, like originally, I was comparing this game to Mario versus Rabbids a bunch because that is how that game works. Like you essentially go through a series of challenges,
Yeah,
and there
true.
is randomness in Mario versus Rabbids. Obviously, like the enemies don't make the same turns every go, but like, yeah,
They do behave in consistent ways though, so you
yeah.
can often be like, okay, for the first three turns I'll do this, and they'll do this.
Yeah, there was usually still some randomness to that. Like they might move a couple
Yeah,
of
yeah.
tiles in a different spot or whatever. But yeah, like essentially it was that sense of like I am able to beat this challenge now. And something I
Mm,
really missed in Into the Breach that we had in Slay the Spire was Slay the Spire would give you the seed for your game, like
mm,
so you could actually load up the same like Slay the Spire run if you wanted to. And I actually used that feature, and it hadn't occurred to me when we played Slay the Spire how much that mattered to me because that maps to in
interesting.
Mario Maker I would go back and reload the level. Like,
And make sure you could beat the level to prove that you had learned your
yeah.
lesson.
And so that like that's something I think, if we do another roguelike and again, I didn't have the time this month to give Into the Breach the time I wanted, and I wanted to try it this month, but like next time we do a roguelike, that's sort of going to be I'm going to try and learn to play the other way. Like I want to try and see if I
Mm,
can deprogram myself from how I've learned to sort of measure success and see if I can get that like Dawn's talking about in the chat, aiming for I guess consistency. And my
mm,
problem there is the runs take too long for me to cope with consist. Like if it's an hour to play through the game,
yeah,
measuring consistency is happening over the course of like 5 to 10 hours of gameplay, which my memory's not
yeah.
that long for starters. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. That's fair enough.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
interesting.
I thought I sort of found it really interesting to explore these concepts like this month. Is like why did I prefer Mario versus Rabbids? And as I was playing this game, I kind of wished it was just like Mario versus Rabbids campaign style. I found myself wishing it
Hmm.
wasn't a roguelike.
Hmm. Yeah, I disagree with that, but I can understand it.
Yeah. So now I think
Um,
we have a special bonus clip from you.
yeah, this was just a clip that I thought was funny, that I thought would be a good one to kind of round out the stream with. So I'm kind of playing through, oh, I've got some Vec that I have to worry about, blah, blah, blah. So I play a turn that ends up pretty good, but it's not perfect. It's like 95% perfect. So I want to go back and take another crack at it with my reset turn,
Yeah.
right?
So we should talk
Okay,
about the
cool.
reset turn a bit more after this. I keep forgetting to bring it up.
So I think, all right, let's try again.
Oh, fuck.
Oh no.
Wrong button.
Yeah,
Alright. GG.
that hurt. That really hurt.
Oh, you clicked the wrong button. That hurts. I was trying to.
Anyway,
Yeah.
there is a confirm on the end turn
Not
button
much
setting that I
else.
had turned off, I think, so I only had myself to blame.
Welcome back to the crew. Let's try that
Oh,
again on.
I've definitely had stuff like that. I definitely, yeah, I hated the way because you could only reset the turn once. Sometimes you
Yeah.
just make a stupid mistake after resetting the turn, because you'd forgot that everything had reset, and then you just like, oh shit, fuck, like I've just
Yep.
ruined myself.
I just really fucked up. Yeah.
Like there was definitely actually that would be one of my complaints about this game, and this is very much a personal taste thing. It's not a criticism of the design. Sometimes it was a very like one small mistake, like one misclick, like you just did, completely totals your game, and you just
Mission
like,
where I get
Yeah.
to not
and
kill
it's
some creatures
annoying
right
if you
after
put
this
like an
goes
hour into a run
down.
and you
Alright, let me
misclick
take down
something
the.
an hour
Yeah.
and a half in, and that just
Yeah.
ends everything
And
immediately.
that's that. Yeah. It's rough
Um,
for sure.
yeah, to talk about the reset mechanic, I meant to bring this up earlier, and scroll past it on the notes. I love that as a mechanic so much. I think because of that exact complaint I just brought up, that sometimes it can only take one small mistake to just immediately ruin your entire run. It's so nice that they
Mm.
had a buffer of like, listen, once per like round, you can have another crack. I
Yeah.
think that that's super valuable, and it really encouraged experimentation as well. There were times where I was like, I don't know how these things are going to interact. I still have my turn reset this fight. Well, let's find out.
Yeah. Let's try
And
it
then I'd
out.
do
Yeah,
something and it'd
exactly.
go completely sideways, and I'd be like, okay, reset. That was awful. Yeah,
Yeah, I had a few times where turns felt really complex. So I was just kind of like, all right, I'm not going to think about it too much. I'm just going to try it. And if it doesn't work, I'll reset it.
yeah.
And that's my strategy.
Yeah, sometimes I would come to rely on it as a crutch, and then you can never do that because then, well, then you're boned. Because
Exactly. Yeah.
if you start to rely on it, you only get it once per session.
Yeah, it's the perfect mechanic to let you experiment, but not let you, as we mentioned before, not let you just go down infinite decision paralysis.
Yeah, and just yeah, like over engineer it, I suppose. Like there's a certain element to this game of just eventually you're gonna be like, oh fuck it, this is good enough, right? Um,
Mm.
yeah, uh, yeah. I mean, I think that's really all we had to talk about. So we'll open it up to some
Two questions.
Q&A. If I can click.
We did get a question before from Sebastian, which is just they were asking, what did you think about each squad's different coin achievements? I love that mechanic as a way to unlock new stuff.
Yep, 100%. I talked earlier about
Yeah, I loved it too.
how I'm achievement driven. So you give me a list of achievements with points associated with them to unlock shit, and that's exactly what I'm about in a game. Um, yeah,
Yeah. One of my favorite games ever, actually, TF2. Whenever they first introduced the new weapon unlocks, you would have to get achievements to, like, I guess, prove that you had, at least learned the basics of what you were trying to do here, so that you could splash out and do things that were more complicated. And I just think it's a great system for progression, because it encourages you to just prove that you can kind of solve these specific side goals, and it's just very
yeah.
fun. It's always
And
very fun.
we talked about it in Doom as well. They're a great way to encourage you to play differently.
Mm.
Like doing things like challenges, like get 8 Vec to kill each other. Like if that's not really the way you play in general, it's kind of encouraging you to use the tools in a slightly different way. Um,
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of weapon breaking in Breath of the Wild,
yeah,
by which I mean a perfect and flawless system.
I mean, unironically, yes, but um,
No, I do quite like it
yeah,
for sure.
but yeah, I think like achievements like that are just a great way to force you to engage in the full range of what the tools that they're giving you can offer. Because
Yeah.
it's very easy to optimize the fun out of a game like this by finding a strategy you like and always employing that. And so the game challenging you to use the things in the other ways they can be used is good for you, good for keeping it fresh. It's just, yeah, great.
I just want to call out, this wasn't really a question, but something that made me have an interesting thought, which was Kipos is mentioning, like the games should be have a balance of story and gameplay, and roguelikes are very hefty on the gameplay and go very light on the story. Something that I think we didn't call out, but Into the Breach did really, really well, is I actually found myself really engaging with the pilots as characters, just because of, like, the barks that they weren't really barks, but like the dialogue lines that they had, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, they would react to these situations with just little bits of dialogue, and you could really feel the characterization coming through with them in very tangible ways. I think one of my favorite moments was just randomly I'd gotten two pilots, and they started saying lines, and I realized, oh, these two are brother and sister.
Oh, cool.
Two nerdy brother and sister pilots that I just incidentally managed to get, and it was just so delightful to watch them be like, oh yeah, you can kind of tell the similarities in the way they speak, and this one's very nerdy and shy, and the sister is a bit more kind of like, still clearly a nerdy engineer, but a bit more gung ho, whereas the brother was very, like, nervously stuttering his way through sentences and things like that. I just found it incredibly captivating in a way that, like, nobody plays Into the Breach for the story, but I found that it was just really well done and,
Yeah.
like, a perfect level of what it should be.
And I know Warbo brought this up a couple of times throughout like the various
Mm.
streams throughout the month and just in the channel, but like there were really fun and consistent underlying themes of like like very late stage capitalist sort of,
Yeah.
sacrificing the
Corporation
environment. Yeah.
exploitations. Yeah, for sure.
I'm really glad he pointed that out because I probably wouldn't have really paid enough attention to it, but it was definitely there as a really fun. Like I think that's something video games get to do better than any other medium is that sort of like background thematic storytelling and that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Like there's so many video games I could point to that do a great job of it. And I love like seeing that sort of environmental storytelling.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it was good stuff. Do you want to ask the question of any of us interested in some PvP afterwards? I'm definitely interested in coming back to this for some PvP.
Yeah.
Probably not right now, but because I have to do other things in a bit, but definitely in the future. I think it'll be very fun. I would like to do maybe we can organize like a bit of um, like a tournament or something. I don't know exactly how it would work, but I think it would be very fun to just have some Into the Breach sessions, competitive sessions.
Yeah, my big regret from this month is how little time I really had to play Into the Breach. So, I definitely feel like I should try and squeeze some in after this.
It's the kind of game where I think you can go back to it and definitely enjoy it, just by kind of dipping your toe in every once in a while.
Yeah, but like I didn't really get to play as many different squads or anything as I would have liked to before coming to this stream, I suppose.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, uh,
Who was your favorite squad, Elliot?
well, I mean the default one is the only time I gave is the only one I really gave any decent amount of time to. So they kind of have to be my answer because I didn't get to put any time in with any others to the point where I
Weirdly, I really liked the default squad as well. I played other squads and I just didn't get into them as much as I liked the default one. Default squad's just great. They just feel like they're the perfect blend of a bit of like trickery, a bit of damage. They're fun.
yeah. I mean, yeah, they were fun. I just wish I could have tried any of the others enough to feel like I could comment on how fun they are too.
Fair enough.
Um, yeah.
Um, okay, so should we get into our next month's game?
One more random
Oh yeah,
random comment, I guess, before we wrap up Q&A. I do just want to say I really like the idea of you um you can't fire. Oh, sorry, you go. Which way was it? You can't fire after you move or whatever.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I just like that as another way to sort of limit down the sort of play space. Like I guess having played Star Wars Imperial Assault, some other things like when you have that full freedom of turn order, it gets very easy to even take one turn and over engineer it because you can be like, oh, I'm going to move here, shoot, and then like move some other bits, and it's just like you can't like you can try to over optimize every single unit's turn. So I kind of like that once you fire, you're stuck there. Um,
yeah. You can't. Yeah, it's a very cool way of giving you a bit more limitation.
yeah, it was definitely frustrating at times because like there are turns I easily could have won if that was not a limitation, but it's consistent and it's there. So yeah. Cool. Well,
Cool.
yeah. Unless anybody has anything else, we'll move on to talking about what we're gonna see next month.
As a reminder, next month's game was chosen by a vote from the patrons. So if you want to gain the ability to, oh wait, no, anyone can vote, can't they?
No, just
All you need to
the
be
patrons.
is, oh, okay, sorry, you do need to be a patron then.
Anyone can
So yeah,
submit a game.
right, that's where I'm getting confused.
Yeah,
And you should submit games actually, if you want, because
yeah.
I have to pick a game for our next month, and I'm struggling to think of what I should pick. So if anyone has any cool ideas, let
Yeah.
me know.
But this month's runner-up in the vote was Chrono Trigger, which was only in the vote this month because a couple of weeks ago a bunch of people got together and all submitted it. So it jumped up the rankings. So
Yeah,
anyone can submit a game, and then it's our patrons who help choose it. And
yeah,
this month, coming in right at the end of the vote,
yeah.
we got
Final day,
Control.
it got like 8 votes or something. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, it was in a solid third place for almost the entire week of the vote, and then at the last minute, Control just surged up, and yeah. So this is going to be our game for the next month till the 4th of September.
Yep. this is gonna. I think I'm gonna really enjoy this game. I've been hearing a lot of really good things about it, so
It's been on
I look forward.
my to play list for quite a while, and
Yeah,
um, I am very excited. As you would know, Ruben, and some other people in the club. I managed to get my hands on a PS5 about a month ago, and they gave out the free PS5 upgrade version of Control, um, through PlayStation recently. So it's like one of my few PS5 games. So got a great excuse to spend a lot of time with my shiny new PlayStation console for the next month now.
can play something that's not just Ratchet and Clank.
I mean, I'd happily play Ratchet and Clank for this club if that would win, but it's never going to win the vote.
Submit Ratchet and Clank, everybody. Elliot is begging for it.
I've given up on expecting console exclusives to make appearances.
Cool. Well, Control. I don't really know anything about this game except I think it's a FPS or like maybe a third-person shooter. We'll see.
I think there's
It'll be
like
fun.
psychic powers involved, and I think it like borders on being a horror game. Yeah, I don't know too much about it. I just know a lot of people really liked it.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm sure it'll be fun to give it a try.
Yeah. So one final reminder: if you want to play Control along with us, see what everyone else in the community is streaming it, the Discord is the place to go.
Yeah. And otherwise, we'll catch everyone next month for Control in the Game Over stream.
Yeah. See you then.
Bye.